Welcome to another episode of Archaeoverse. This video is a retrospective look at a dugout canoe building project I did several years ago with my students here at SUNY Potsdam. Hope you enjoy it. About 3 years ago, I became interested in the manufacturing of dugout canoes. In reading about the manufacturing process and talking to people about the manufacturing process, I learned that there's a variety of different ways to approach it. Some folks, for instance, I have a colleague in the Netherlands who described to me creating a dugout canoe using nothing but bone and shell tools. I believe they crafted this out of tilia, basswood, or linden in that part of the world. In Eastern North America, there's lots of ethnohistoric accounts. There's lots of reference to the use of fire. Boats typically were made of cypress, made of white pine. There are other materials represented also, but those two seem to be the biggest. So we followed these recipes, we followed these accounts in setting forth to create a dugout canoe here on campus. And so we used nothing but stone tools and fire. Stone tools, fire, and wood basically to create a dugout canoe. We turned a 16-foot white pine log, which was approximately 2.5 feet in diameter, into a dugout canoe. Over the course of 4 weeks, 9 students and myself, every day, Monday through Friday, 8 hours a day, burned, scraped, and chopped our way to a dugout canoe. We also wanted to understand how much fuel wood is spent. The students were forced to forage for firewood. Every morning they'd arrive, they would then be tasked with collecting firewood. All the firewood would be hauled back to the boat where it was weighed prior to burning. We would then burn 50% of the log at a time, and the other 50% would be hacked at, would be chopped at using stone adzes. And we can look at those in a few moments. Each half would burn maybe for 3 hours time until approximately lunch rolled around. After lunch, the fires would die down and we would take cedar posts and we would scrape the charred remains away from the boat. At first, this wasn't too effective, right? At first, you have the log and you have the majority of the moisture in the outer rings of the log. So fire really wasn't all that effective. What were these stone adzes, effective in chopping and splintering the heated wood. It would also increase the surface area by fracturing and splintering the wood so that the fire would be more effective in penetrating deeper in. Once we got maybe 6 inches in to the center of the log, the fire then became quite effective. Burning would allow for maybe 2 to 3 inches, 5 centimeters approximately of charring to happen after each burn. Charring that could then be removed by scraping with these cedar posts. It was this repetition of burning, scraping, chopping, burning, scraping, chopping, which ultimately took us to some depth, 20, 30 centimeters in depth, at which point we had to adjust the strategy a bit, meaning we had to account for the fact the flames were now touching the sides of the boat. They were potentially burning the hull. So we used local clay, clayey-like soils, and lined the hull with clay prior to the burn. And the idea being that the clay would protect the walls. The clay would get hot, the clay would become brittle, but it wouldn't allow the flames to actually burn the sides of the boat. This worked well. Small fires, targeted fires toward the center of the boat, and again it would burn, and then we would scrape. We would scrape, and then we would pound. On the day of the launch, we were fortunate to have help. We had maybe 10 students from Akwesasne, the Mohawk community not too far away from us, who came and gave us a hand moving this 600-ish pound dugout canoe. And we used log rollers to get it onto a ramp to launch it into the river. And then we all got an opportunity to take it for a paddle. It was funny, it was eye-opening. There were individuals who thought it was going to roll over immediately, that you were going to sit in it and immediately capsize, which wasn't the case. It was remarkably stable. I mean, it was tippy, right? The initial stability was rather rocky, but it would take a lot for all the weight in that hull to literally flip itself over. So it was stable. I stood up in it once and paddled. There are accounts of people poling in dugout canoes, that they would actually be driven via an individual standing and poling through shallows, through marshes. I fell out of it at the end, as you'll see. But yeah, it was quite stable. It was impressive. How did it handle? Much like paddling a log. So it took a lot to get it going, and then once it was going, it was moving. I'd like to do more. I'd like to do more paddling of the boat to really experience, what a dugout canoe can and cannot do in terms of maneuverability. So what did we learn? The manufacturing of the dugout canoe was quite eye-opening. It was interesting how much fuel wood we used. How much wood was used to burn out this 16-foot, 2.5-foot in diameter white pine log. Again, every day, students started by foraging for wood. By the end of week 3, wood became very hard to find in the park that we were working in. Students would have to walk far and wide to find firewood. By the end of 4 weeks, I would say that it was largely exhausted. It was largely exhausted, and we were doing one thing, making a dugout canoe. So I often reflect on this. How much wood would be needed if we were making multiple dugout canoes? How much wood would be needed if we had a village of 100, 200, 300 people, and we're using wood to make fire for all kinds of things. To cook our food, to fire pots, to keep insects away, to make dugout canoes. How long until you'd exhaust the fuel source, the available dry firewood in that area? How long until you have to move, pretty much? So there you have it. Again, that's one approach to building a dugout canoe. It was eye-opening, it was educational, and it was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe, please hit like, and yeah, keep the positive comments coming. Take care.